Picture this. You're 14 years old, and death has just invaded and walked through the marble corridors of the only home you've ever known. The woman on the golden stretcher was the most beautiful person in the Roman Empire just yesterday. But today, her skin looks like cold wax against purple silk. You press yourself against the column, trying to become invisible as the procession passes. Palace freedmen like you learn early that survival means staying in the shadows, especially when powerful people are grieving. But something about her face catches in your memory, the delicate arch of her eyebrows, the way her dark hair frames features that could have been carved by the gods themselves. The Domus Aurea has been your entire world since birth. Born a slave in these very kitchens, freed as a child when your quick mind caught someone's attention, educated just enough to be useful but not enough to be dangerous. You know every secret passage carved into these walls, every servant's whisper that echoes through the corridors, every shift in mood that ripples from the emperor's chambers to the furthest wine cellar. The kitchens taught you to read Latin on discarded scrolls. The libraries showed you Greek poetry when no one was watching. The gardens became your classroom for rhetoric practice, speaking to marble statues who never corrected your pronunciation. This palace raised you, fed you, shaped you, but it never let you forget that everything you are exists at someone else's pleasure. You've seen 3 emperors from a distance, but none like this one. Nero's voice carries differently than his predecessors, higher, more theatrical, as if he's always performing for an invisible audience. Today, though, his performance has cracked. The sound that echoes through the halls isn't imperial command. It's the broken wailing of a man who's discovered something his power cannot touch. "Bring her back to me." The words bounce off marble and gold, growing more desperate with each repetition. "I command it. Do you hear me? I command it." Senators bow their heads. Guards exchange glances heavy with nervous energy. Slaves scurry faster, as if speed might make them invisible. Everyone understands what you're witnessing the moment when absolute power meets absolute helplessness. From your hiding spot, you watch the emperor clutch the dead woman's hand. His fingers are soft, unmarked by any real work, adorned with rings worth more than most citizens see in their lifetimes. But they shake like an old man's as he touches skin that will never warm again. "Poppaea," he whispers, and the name carries weight you don't fully understand. "My beloved Poppaea." You retreat to your small quarters as darkness falls, but sleep feels impossible. Through your window you can see torches burning in the imperial chambers, dozens of them, turning night into artificial day. Servants whisper that the emperor refuses to leave her side, that he's been talking to the body for hours, making promises, begging forgiveness for something no one dares ask about. 3 months pass, like walking through thick honey. The empire holds its breath, waiting to see what shape the emperor's grief might take. Normal Roman custom demands cremation, within days, fire to release the soul, ashes to honor memory. Instead, Nero does something unprecedented. He has Poppaea's body, preserved by Egyptian embalmers, placed in a tomb more elaborate than Augustus himself received. Priests appear overnight, establishing rituals to honor the new goddess Poppaea. Citizens are expected to offer prayers, leave flowers, speak her name with reverence. The emperor talks to her portrait during state dinners, pausing for responses that never come, nodding as if he hears wisdom in the silence. You begin to understand that madness and power make dangerous companions. When no one can contradict the emperor, reality becomes whatever he declares it to be. If he says his wife is a goddess, she's a goddess. If he says she can hear his prayers, then the empire must pretend to believe. But understanding doesn't prepare you for the moment it touches your life directly. You're returning from the archives one afternoon, arms full of scrolls destined for the emperor's private study, when you feel eyes on you like physical weight. Across the courtyard, Nero stands perfectly still among his advisors, but his gaze has found you through the crowd of servants and politicians. Time stretches like pulled metal. You've been invisible for 14 years, just another palace freedman, with no particular beauty, no special skills, no reason for imperial attention. But something in his stare makes your skin crawl with premonition. You bow quickly, deeply, the way you've been taught since childhood. When you straighten, he's still watching. One of his advisors says something, but the emperor raises his hand for silence, never breaking eye contact. You see his lips move, forming words you can't hear, but somehow know will reshape everything you thought you understood about your place in this palace. The scrolls in your arms suddenly feel unbearably heavy. Your legs want to run, but palace training keeps you frozen in proper deference until he finally turns away. Only then do you allow yourself to breathe, to move, to pretend that imperial attention might pass over you like a storm cloud moving towards someone else's fields. But storms don't change direction once they've chosen their target. You spend the next week trying to become invisible again, but in a palace, invisibility is just another illusion that powerful people allow you to maintain. The summons comes on a Tuesday morning not for kitchen duty or message delivery, but to attend an imperial banquet as a server. Terror and curiosity war in your chest as you're given fresh robes, instructed in proper wine-pouring technique, warned about the importance of silence and discretion. The dining hall you enter that evening exists in a different world from the servants' quarters. Gold leaf catching candlelight, silk hangings that cost more than entire villages, the scent of imported spices mixing with expensive oils. But the strangest thing about this magnificent room is the empty chair beside the emperor's throne. It's been set for dinner, golden plate, crystal goblet, silk napkin, folded with perfect precision. Nero speaks to it throughout the meal as if someone invisible occupies the seat. The wine is exceptional tonight, don't you think, my beloved? He pauses, tilting his head as if listening to a response only he can hear. Yes, I thought you'd approve of the vintage. The assembled senators and advisors play along with this theatre of madness. They toast the empty chair, refer to Poppia in present tense, laugh at jokes she supposedly makes in the silence between his words. Watching grown men pretend to hear a dead woman's voice would be funny if it weren't so deeply terrifying. You move between the couches with wine, hands trembling as you try not to spill anything on robes worth more than your life. The emperor's voice follows you talking to his invisible wife about poetry, about politics, about the beauty of certain flowers in their private garden. But when you lean forward to fill his goblet, his fingers wrap around your wrist like iron bands. Look at me, he commands, his voice cutting through all other conversation. You raise your eyes, and the world stops. His face is inches from yours, studying your features with the intensity of a sculptor examining marble for flaws. His breath smells of wine and something darker decay, maybe, or the kind of sickness that comes from too much power and not enough truth. Extraordinary, he whispers, and the word carries weight that makes your stomach drop. The gods work in mysterious ways, don't they? His fingers tighten on your wrist until you're certain he'll leave bruises. But it's his eyes that truly frighten you, the way they move across your face like hands, memorizing every detail, comparing what they see to some internal image you can't access. The resemblance is, he stops himself, glances toward the empty chair, then back to your face. No, it's more than resemblance, it's divine providence. Other servants continue moving through the room, but you can feel the attention of every powerful person in Rome focusing on this moment. Senators lean forward slightly, advisors exchange meaningful glances. The emperor's wife, his living wife, watches from across the room with eyes like winter. He releases your wrist suddenly, and you stumble backward, wine sloshing in the pitcher. But you can feel his gaze following your every movement for the rest of the evening. When you pour wine for others, he watches. When you clear plates, he watches. When you finally retreat toward the servant's entrance, his voice stops you. What's your name, boy? The question hangs in perfumed air. You turn back, bow again, speak the name you've carried for 14 years. A simple Roman name, nothing special, nothing memorable. But when he repeats it, the sound changes, becomes something else entirely. Sporus. He tastes the syllables like expensive wine, a good name, a name with possibilities. You don't understand what he means, but the senators do. Several lean closer to each other, whispering behind jeweled hands. The emperor's wife sets down her goblet with more force than necessary, the crystal ringing against marble like a small bell tolling. Walking back to your quarters feels like moving through thick water. Other servants avoid your eyes, as if imperial attention might be contagious. You understand their fear in this palace. Being noticed by the wrong person can mean elevation or destruction, often both. That night, you lie awake, staring at ceiling stones you've memorized since childhood. Through the walls, you can hear the emperor's voice, carrying from his chambers, talking, pleading, promising things to someone who can't answer. The sound makes your skin crawl with recognition you don't want to acknowledge. The second summons comes 3 days later, but this time you're not serving wine. Guards escort you through corridors you've never seen, past rooms that smell of incense and expensive oils, toward the emperor's private chambers. Your feet move automatically, but your mind screams warnings you can't voice. The room you enter exists beyond anything you've imagined. Portraits cover every wall, dozens of them, all showing the same woman from different angles, in different lights, capturing every possible expression of her beautiful face. It's like being surrounded by ghosts, or perhaps by one ghost multiplied into an army of memories. Nero sits among these images like a man drowning in the past. When he sees you, he rises slowly, and you understand with crystalline clarity that your life as you've known it has just ended. The question isn't what will happen next, it's whether you'll survive whatever he has planned. Turn around, he says softly, slowly. You obey, because disobedience isn't possible here. His eyes map your face, your posture, the way light falls across your features. He walks a full circle around you, and with each step, you feel yourself becoming less human and more object, something to be studied, evaluated, potentially acquired. Remarkable, he breathes. She's returned to me, hasn't she? Not in the same form, but the essence, the divine spark. He gestures toward the largest portrait, then back to your face. Look at yourself in the mirror. The polished bronze shows you what he sees, and your blood turns to ice water. The resemblance is undeniable, particularly around the eyes and the delicate bone structure of your face. In the right light, from the right angle, you could almost be her younger brother. But you're not her brother. You're not related to her at all. You're just a palace freedman who happened to inherit the wrong combination of features, and now those features have caught the attention of the most dangerous man in the world. Divine providence, Nero repeats, his voice filled with an awful kind of wonder. She's come back to me. You wake up in a room you've never seen before, and the first thing you notice is that the door has no handle on the inside. The second thing is that your old clothes are gone, replaced by a silk tunic that costs more than most Romans earn in a year. The quarters are beautiful in the way that expensive cages can be beautiful. Marble floors warmed by hidden braziers, windows that look out onto private gardens where peacocks strut between flowering trees, furniture carved from exotic woods and inlaid with precious stones. But beauty doesn't change the fact that you're trapped. 3 days pass in this luxurious prison. Servants bring meals on golden plates, food you've only seen at imperial banquets. They speak to you with the formal respect reserved for important prisoners, their eyes carefully avoiding yours. When you ask questions, they bow and retreat without answering. On the 4th morning, the physicians arrive. You recognize the type immediately, Greek freedmen with soft hands and expensive clothes, the kind of men who make their living tending to bodies that matter. They carry leather cases filled with instruments that gleam like jewelry in the morning light. Behind them walk servants with braziers, hot water, lengths of clean linen. The lead physician is older than the others, his hair grey-white and his movements precise. He sets his case on the marble table with practiced care, then turns to examine you with eyes that have seen too much of human frailty to be surprised by anything. "I am Xenophon," he says in accented Latin. "I will be performing your procedure." The word procedure hangs in the perfumed air like a death sentence. You understand now why the door has no handle, why the servants won't meet your eyes, why this room exists in the first place. This isn't just imprisonment, it's preparation. What procedure, you ask, though part of you already knows. Xenophon glances toward the door, then back to your face. For a moment, something almost human flickers in his expression. The emperor wishes certain modifications to be made, to enhance your natural resemblance to his late wife. The room tilts sideways. You grab the edge of the table to steady yourself as the full horror of what he's describing sinks in. Not just dressing like her, not just acting like her, but being surgically altered to look like her. "I won't do it," you say, surprised by the steadiness of your own voice. "I won't let you. I won't let you." Xenophon's smile is tired and sad. "Young man, you misunderstand your situation. This is not a request." The door opens, and guards enter, not the ceremonial soldiers who stand at attention during banquets, but practical men with calloused hands and weapons they know how to use. Their presence answers any questions about your choices in this matter. "The emperor is coming," one of them announces. "Prepare everything." Nero enters like a man visiting a holy shrine. He's changed clothes since yesterday, now wearing purple silk that makes his skin look pale as parchment. But it's his eyes that frighten you most. They burn with the kind of fever that comes from believing impossible things. "Sporus," he says, and your name sounds different in his mouth, softer, more feminine. Today you become perfect. You try to run. Of course you do. Every muscle in your body screams the same desperate command: escape, flee, survive. But the guards catch you before you reach the door, their hands efficient and impersonal as they drag you back to the table. "Please," you whisper, the word torn from somewhere deep in your chest. "Please don't do this." Nero approaches, and for a moment his expression almost looks sympathetic. "You don't understand yet," he says gently. "This is a gift. When you see how beautiful you become, how perfectly you embody her spirit, you'll thank me." They strap you to the table with leather bonds that smell of previous use. Xenophon begins laying out his instruments with the methodical care of a craftsman preparing for delicate work. Scalpels, needles, small saws, objects whose purpose you don't want to understand. "The mandragora will help with the pain," the physician explains, approaching with a cup of bitter-smelling liquid. "But the procedure will take several hours. You must remain very still." The drug tastes like earth and death, but it doesn't bring unconsciousness just a floating distance from your own body. You remain aware of everything: the pressure of the physician's hands, the careful precision of his cuts, the emperor's voice, offering encouragement as they reshape your flesh. "Careful with the face," Nero instructs. "Those features must remain exactly as they are." Time becomes meaningless. Sometimes you drift away from the pain, watching from somewhere near the ceiling as they work on the body strapped to the table. Other times you crash back into your flesh with agonizing clarity, feeling every touch of the knife. Through it all, Nero provides commentary like a director guiding actors. "Yes, that's perfect. She had exactly that curve there. No, softer, remember. She was delicate as a flower." The worst part isn't the physical pain, it's understanding that this violation has been planned in precise detail. Every cut serves a specific purpose in transforming you into his vision of Poppia reborn. You're not a person anymore. You're a sculpture being carved from living marble. When they finally finish, You drift in and out of fevered consciousness for days. Sometimes you wake to find Nero sitting beside your bed, reading poetry aloud or simply watching you breathe. Other times, it's servants changing bandages, their faces carefully neutral as they tend to wounds that will heal into your new identity. The worst is over, Xenophon tells you during one of his examinations. The healing will take weeks, but you're young and strong. You'll survive this. Survival isn't the question anymore. What you'll survive as, that's what terrifies you. The first time they bring mirrors, you refuse to look. But curiosity and horror are powerful forces, and eventually you force yourself to confront what they've made of you. The face remains yours. Those were the features that caught the emperor's attention in the first place. But everything else has been softened, feminized, transformed into something that might once have been called beautiful. You touch the bandaged areas gingerly, feeling the foreign shapes beneath the linen. This body belonged to you for 14 years, but it doesn't anymore. They've stolen it, reshaped it, turned it into a canvas for someone else's obsession. Perfect. Nero breathes when he sees you examining your reflection. She's returned to me exactly as I dreamed. He begins bringing gifts, then jewelry that once adorned a dead woman's skin, perfumes that still carry her scent, silk gowns in colours that flattered her complexion. Each present comes with detailed instructions about when and how to wear it, as if you're a doll being dressed for an elaborate game. But the most disturbing gifts are the memories. Nero sits beside your bed for hours, telling you stories about Poppeia's life, her childhood, her dreams, her fears, the intimate details that only a husband would know. He's not just sharing these memories, he's teaching them to you, expecting you to make them your own. She loved jasmine flowers, he says, placing a sprig on your bedside table. The scent reminded her of her mother's garden in Pompeii. You must remember to love them too. The name they give you feels like wearing a dead woman's skin, but you learn to answer to it because the alternative is worse. Sabina, after Poppaea Sabina, the empress whose ghost you're meant to embody for the rest of your life. The lessons begin as soon as you can walk without reopening your wounds. Every morning brings new instructors, each tasked with erasing another piece of who you used to be. A woman named Claudia teaches you to sit with your knees together, to walk without the confident stride that marks masculine movement, to hold your hands in poses that suggest delicacy rather than strength. No, 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 she says, clapping her hands sharply when you forget. Empress Poppaea moved like flowing water, not like a soldier marching to war. Again, you practice for hours in front of polished bronze mirrors, watching yourself become someone else, one gesture at a time. The walk is the hardest part, learning to take smaller steps, to let your hips move differently, to occupy space as if you're apologizing for existing rather than claiming your right to be there. The voice lessons are torture of a different kind. A thin Greek man named Apollodorus works with you daily, pressing on your throat to feel the vibrations as you speak, forcing you to pitch your words higher and softer. Your natural voice becomes forbidden territory, too deep, too masculine, too much a reminder of the boy they're systematically erasing. Think of honey dripping from a spoon, he instructs. Let the words fall slowly, sweetly. The emperor's wife spoke like music. But the cruelest lessons are the ones that teach you Poppeia's history. You must learn not just how she looked and moved, but who she was, her childhood in Pompeii, her first marriage to a senator, her rise to imperial favor. These aren't just facts to memorize, they're memories you're expected to claim as your own. The instructor is an elderly woman named Julia, who served in Poppeia's household. She speaks of the dead empress with genuine affection, which makes the entire exercise feel like grave robbing. She was frightened of thunderstorms, Julia explains, her eyes distant with memory. As a child, she would hide under tables during the worst ones. The emperor found this endearing. He would hold her during storms and sing soft songs until her trembling stopped. You're expected to nod, to smile. to accept this fear as your own. When thunderstorms come, you must remember to flinch, to seek comfort in the Emperor's arms, to let him sing away terrors that were never yours to begin with. The physical transformation accelerates as your body heals. Seamstresses arrive with bolts of silk in colours that complemented Poppaea's complexion. They drape fabric across your shoulders, pin hems to accommodate your height, create an entire wardrobe designed to complete your metamorphosis. Each garment comes with its own lesson. How to manage long skirts without tripping, how to arrange folds for the most flattering silhouette, how to move gracefully in robes that restrict your natural stride. The jewelry is heaviest of all, not just because of the gold and gems, but because each piece carries the weight of its previous owner's touch. This necklace was her favourite, the jeweller explains, fastening emeralds around your throat. She wore it on her wedding day, and during every important ceremony afterward. The Emperor specifically requested that you have it. The stones are cold against your skin, but they warm quickly to body heat. You wonder if they still remember her pulse, if they're confused by the different rhythm of your heartbeat. Makeup becomes a daily ritual that takes hours to complete. Servants skilled in cosmetics arrive before dawn to paint your face into an acceptable approximation of feminine beauty. They darken your eyes with kohl, rouge your cheeks with powdered berries, use white lead to create the pale complexion that Romans prize in their women. The transformation is so complete that sometimes you forget who you see in the mirrors. The boy who used to read poetry in the palace gardens seems like someone from a half-remembered dream. This person with painted eyes and silk gowns feels more real, even though every detail is artificial. The Emperor visits daily, bringing fresh flowers and impossible requests. He wants you to remember conversations you never had, to cherish gifts you never received, to mourn experiences that belonged to someone else entirely. "Do you remember our first kiss?" he asks one afternoon, his voice thick with emotion. "In the rose garden, just after sunset? You said the light made me look like Apollo himself." You've been coached for this moment. The appropriate response is a shy smile, a gentle touch to his hand, words about passion and devotion that taste like ash in your mouth. "How could I forget?" You whisper, hating yourself for the lie. His face lights up with such genuine joy that for a moment you almost pity him. This broken man who rules the world but can't accept that some things are beyond even imperial command. He wants so desperately to believe that love can conquer death, that will can reshape reality, that you've returned to him exactly as you were. But you weren't ever his to begin with. The woman he mourns is truly dead, and you're just a living reminder of his own guilt and madness. The wedding preparations begin 6 months after your surgery, when your body has healed enough to convincingly play the role of imperial bride. The ceremony will take place in spring, timed to coincide with festivals celebrating renewal and rebirth. The symbolism isn't lost on anyone, least of all you. Nero spares no expense planning what he calls the wedding of the age. He's commissioned new golden vessels for the ceremony, ordered musicians from across the empire, invited dignitaries who will witness his triumph over death itself. The menu alone costs more than most citizens see in their lifetimes. But the most expensive element is psychological. You must convince Rome's most powerful people that this spectacle is normal, acceptable, even beautiful. When senators' wives congratulate you on your engagement, you must smile and blush appropriately. When foreign ambassadors offer wedding gifts, you must accept them graciously and speak of your happiness. The rehearsals are endless and exhausting. Every gesture must be perfect, every word calculated for maximum emotional impact. You practice walking down the aisle until your feet bleed in the silk slippers. You rehearse the wedding vows until they flow like natural speech rather than memorized lines. Remember, Nero says during one of these sessions, "This isn't just theatre, this is sacred truth. You are returning to me as my beloved wife, and our love will be celebrated for generations. The tragedy is that part of him actually believes this. In his broken mind, he's not forcing a mutilated boy to play dress-up with a dead woman's identity. He's performing a miracle, reuniting soulmates across the boundary of death itself. The night before the wedding, you sit alone in chambers that once belonged to Poppaea herself. Her perfumes still linger in the air, her jewelry still gleams from carved wooden boxes, her gowns still hang in cedar wardrobes like the preserved skins of a former life. Tomorrow you'll stand before Rome's elite and promise to love, honor, and obey a man who has systematically destroyed everything you were or might have become. You'll speak vows in a voice that's no longer your own, wearing a face that's been surgically altered to match his fantasies, claiming memories that belong to a woman who died because of his violence. But tonight, in the darkness between who you were and who you'll pretend to be, you allow yourself one moment of honest grief, not for Poppaea, though her fate was terrible enough. Not even for the emperor, though his madness inspires more pity than hatred. You grieve for the boy who loved Greek poetry, who dreamed of studying philosophy, who might have lived an ordinary life filled with ordinary joys. That boy died on a surgeon's table 6 months ago, but his ghost still haunts the mirrors where a stranger's face looks back at you. Tomorrow, that ghost will be buried forever beneath silk and ceremony. Tonight is your last chance to remember his name. 2 years have passed since you became someone else's dream made flesh, and the strangest part is how normal the nightmare has become. You wake each morning in silk sheets that once warmed a dead woman's skin, dress in robes that carry her scent, answer to a name that tastes like grave dirt on your tongue. The face in the mirrors no longer startles you. The boy who once read poetry in palace gardens feels like a character from someone else's story, distant, half-remembered, probably fictional. When senators' wives compliment your beauty at state dinners, you smile and thank them as if their words mean something. When foreign diplomats present gifts to the emperor's beloved wife, you accept them graciously, your voice pitched at exactly the right tone to suggest feminine gratitude. The performance has become so natural that sometimes you forget it's a performance at all. During quiet moments, when Nero speaks tenderly about shared memories that never belonged to you, your heart almost responds with something that might be called affection. Not love, that word has been carved out of you, along with everything else but a kind of Stockholm syndrome that makes survival bearable. Then, the emperor announces his grand tour of Greece, and your carefully constructed world begins to crumble. We'll show them what Roman culture can achieve, Nero declares during a planning session that includes his most trusted advisors. My performances will demonstrate the true spirit of artistic excellence. And you, my beloved, will be living proof that love transcends even death itself. The preparations take months. Ships must be prepared for imperial transport, guards selected for foreign service, gifts chosen to impress Greek dignitaries. But the most complex preparation involves you how to present a surgically altered Roman boy as the legitimate empress of the greatest empire on earth. New tutors arrive to teach you Greek customs, the proper way to address foreign nobles, the cultural nuances that will help you navigate unfamiliar social landscapes. You learn which topics to avoid in conversation, which gestures might offend, how to hold yourself with the dignity expected of someone who represents Roman power abroad. Remember, your etiquette instructor explains, these Greeks consider themselves our cultural superiors. They invented theatre, philosophy, the arts that our emperor loves so dearly. But they also live under Roman rule, and they must never forget who holds real power. The journey itself becomes a floating palace. The emperor's ship carries more luxury than most Greek cities, possess golden furniture, silk tapestries, a private theatre where Nero can practice his performances. Your quarters connect directly to his, because even during travel, the fiction of your marriage must be maintained. Standing on deck as familiar Italian coastline disappears behind you, you experience something unexpected, a flutter of anticipation that has nothing to do with fear. For 2 years, your world has been confined to palace walls, every moment scripted, every interaction carefully controlled. Now you're sailing toward places where people don't know your story, where the elaborate fiction of your identity might face genuine testing. The first stop is Athens, and the reception proves more challenging than anyone anticipated. Greek aristocrats are too sophisticated to openly mock their Roman conquerors, but their politeness carries edges sharp enough to draw blood. What a lovely, young, 10 woman, an elderly philosopher, remarks during your first formal dinner. His pause, just long enough to suggest he sees through the elaborate costume. The emperor is fortunate to have found such a devoted companion. Nero either doesn't notice the subtle insults or chooses to ignore them. He's too excited about the opportunity to perform before audiences who supposedly understand true art. But you feel every sideways glance, every whispered conversation that stops when you approach, every moment of awkward silence when Greek wives try to make small talk with someone they can't quite categorize. The language barrier provides unexpected protection. Your Greek is functional but limited, which gives you excuses to smile politely rather than engage in conversations that might reveal uncomfortable truths. When local women ask about your childhood or your family, you can deflect with linguistic confusion, claiming not to understand questions that probe too deeply. But the emperor's performances create their own complications. Nero enters every competition with absolute confidence in his artistic superiority, expecting Greek audiences to appreciate talents that Roman crowds are forced to applaud. The reality proves more humbling than he's prepared to accept. In Athens, he competes in a poetry contest against scholars who've spent their entire lives studying verse. His composition about the glory of imperial love receives polite applause, but the winner, a young Greek whose poem explores the tragedy of Orpheus and Eurydice, earns genuine enthusiasm from the crowd. They don't understand sophisticated Roman aesthetics. Nero explains afterward, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. These provincials prefer primitive emotional displays to true artistic refinement. But you see something different in his eyes, the first crack in his absolute certainty that the world revolves around his desires. In Rome, no one dares suggest that the emperor's artistic talents might be anything less than divine. Here, among people who consider themselves the inventors of culture itself, his abilities face honest evaluation for the first time. The breaking point comes in Corinth, during a festival dedicated to Dionysus. Nero insists on performing a dramatic recreation of the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, the story of a husband who travels to the underworld to retrieve his dead wife. The symbolism isn't lost on anyone, least of all you. You'll play Eurydice naturally, he announces during rehearsals. Together, we'll show these Greeks the true meaning of love that conquers death. The irony is so heavy it threatens to crush you. Here you are, a living person forced to play a dead woman in a story about retrieving the dead from Hades. But the deepest irony is that in the original myth, Orpheus fails, his wife remains dead, and his obsessive love ultimately destroys him. The performance takes place in an ancient amphitheatre, carved into living rock, surrounded by olive groves that have witnessed centuries of human drama. Greek aristocrats fill the stone seats, their faces politely expectant. You wear robes that flow like water in the evening breeze, your movements choreographed to suggest ethereal beauty rather than earthly flesh. But as you stand on that stage, pretending to be rescued from death by a man who has systematically killed everything you were, something fundamental shifts inside you. The applause sounds hollow. The emperor's triumphant expression looks grotesque. The whole elaborate fiction suddenly seems exactly what it is, a madman's delusion performed for an audience too polite to laugh. That night, alone in your chambers, while Nero celebrates what he considers an artistic triumph, you catch sight of yourself in a polished bronze mirror. The face looking back wears perfect makeup, expensive jewelry, silk robes that cost more than most people earn in their lifetimes. But behind the painted eyes, you recognize something that hasn't been there for 2 years, a spark of the person you used to be. The recognition terrifies you more than anything that's happened since this nightmare began. For months, you've survived by becoming the fiction, by allowing Sabina to consume Sporus so completely that the original personality simply disappeared. But suddenly, inexplicably, the boy who loved poetry is stirring in the depths of your consciousness, and his awakening threatens to shatter the careful performance that keeps you alive. News arrives from Rome like a lightning bolt, splitting a clear sky. Rebellions have erupted across the empire, not the usual provincial uprisings that flare and die, but serious military challenges to imperial authority. Governors are declaring independence. Legions are switching sides. The Praetorian Guard, those elite soldiers who exist solely to protect the emperor, have withdrawn their support. Impossible, Nero declares, when the first reports reach Corinth. They wouldn't dare. I am beloved by the people, chosen by the gods themselves. But the messages keep coming, each one darker than the last. The Senate has met in emergency session. Your name, or rather Sabina's name, appears on lists of those condemned as enemies of the state. The elaborate fiction of your marriage has become a political liability that threatens to drag down anyone associated with it. We return to Rome immediately, the emperor announces, his voice carrying a brittle authority that fools no one. I'll show these traitors what happens when they challenge divine will. The journey back to Italy becomes a desperate flight. Ships that carried luxury goods to impress Greek audiences now transport only essential supplies and loyal guards. The emperor's confidence crumbles a little more with each day, replaced by paranoid rage that lashes out at anyone within reach. But the most terrifying realization is that your fate remains tied to his. If Nero falls, what happens to the boy he transformed into his dead wife's ghost? Will the next emperor simply execute you as a symbol of the previous regime's madness? Will you be displayed as a curiosity or hidden away as an embarrassment? For the first time in 2 years, you're forced to contemplate a future beyond the immediate survival of each day. The prospect should feel liberating, but instead it fills you with a terror deeper than anything you've experienced since the surgeon's knife first touched your flesh. You never reach Rome, and perhaps that's a mercy you don't yet understand. Nero's supporters abandon him one by one as news of the approaching rebellion spreads through the imperial fleet, until only a handful of die-hard loyalists remain willing to share his fate. The villa, where you take refuge, sits on a hillside outside the capital, surrounded by olive groves that rustle with secrets in the Mediterranean wind. From your window, you can see smoke rising from the city below. Whether from celebration or destruction, no one dares to guess. The emperor paces through marble rooms like a caged animal, alternating between grandiose plans for crushing the rebellion and theatrical preparations for his own death. They'll regret this betrayal, he mutters, during one of his increasingly frequent soliloquies. History will remember them as the cowards who destroyed Rome's greatest artist, who silenced the voice that could have sung the empire to eternal glory. But in quieter moments, when he thinks no one is watching, you catch glimpses of the broken man beneath the imperial persona. His hands shake when he thinks about facing capture. His voice cracks when he practices the suicide speech he's been composing. For the first time since you've known him, Nero looks genuinely afraid. It's during one of these vulnerable moments that he finally sees you clearly, not as Poppaea reborn, not as a living monument to his ability to reshape reality, but as the frightened young man you've always been beneath the costume. "I destroyed you, didn't I?" he whispers one night, his voice so quiet you almost miss the words. "Just like I destroyed her, just like I destroy everything I claim to love." The confession hangs in the perfumed air between you, like a bridge you're not sure you want to cross. For 2 years, you've survived by accepting his delusions, playing the part he assigned, pretending that your mutilation was somehow an act of devotion rather than calculated cruelty. Now he's offering something that might be genuine remorse, and you don't know how to respond. You remember who you were before, don't you? He continues, studying your face in the lamplight. Sometimes I see him looking out through your eyes, the boy who read poetry in the gardens, who dreamed of studying philosophy. What was his name? The question hits you like a physical blow. No one has asked about your original identity since the day they strapped you to the surgeon's table. The name feels foreign on your tongue, as if it belongs to someone else entirely. Sporus, you whisper, and the word carries weight you'd forgotten it possessed. Nero nods slowly, tears beginning to track down his painted cheeks. Sporus, I'd almost forgotten. He reaches toward your face as if to touch it, then stops himself. I convinced myself I was saving you, you know, giving you purpose, meaning, a chance to become something greater than a palace freedman, but I was just feeding my own sickness. The moment of clarity doesn't last long. By morning, the Emperor has retreated into familiar delusions, speaking to you as Sabina again, making plans for the glorious return to Rome that will never come. But something has shifted between you, a crack in the performance that can't be fully sealed. When word arrives that enemy soldiers are less than a day's march from the villa, Nero finally accepts what he's spent weeks refusing to acknowledge. His reign is over. His empire has rejected him. His only remaining choice is how to die. I won't give them the satisfaction of dragging me through the streets, he declares, calling for poison and a dagger as backup options. They'll remember me as I choose to be remembered, defiant to the end, choosing my own fate rather than submitting to theirs. But even facing death, he can't let go of his obsession with you. You'll come with me, won't you? He asks, his voice carrying the desperate hope of a child afraid of the dark. In the afterlife, we can be together as we were meant to be. No rebellions, no politics, just eternal love. The request doesn't surprise you. You've always known that your life belonged to him as completely as your body. But something has awakened during these weeks of crisis, some spark of the person you used to be that refuses to accept this final surrender. No, you say quietly, the word feeling strange and powerful in your mouth. Nero stares at you as if you've spoken in a foreign language. What did you say? I said no. The words come easier the second time, carrying conviction that surprises you both. I won't die for your fantasies. I won't follow you into whatever madness comes next. His face cycles through shock, hurt, and finally rage. After everything I've given you, the luxury, the position, the chance to embody divine beauty itself, this is how you repay my devotion. You gave me nothing, you reply, and the truth of it fills you with unexpected strength. You took everything, my body, my name, my life, all of it stolen to feed your sickness. But my death, that's still mine to choose. The Emperor's suicide is messy and undignified, nothing like the heroic end he's spent weeks rehearsing. When soldiers finally break down the villa doors, they find his body sprawled on marble floors, his final performance concluded with characteristic theatrical excess. You survive the immediate aftermath by staying silent and still in a storage room, listening to boots march through corridors as the new regime claims its prize. But survival brings its own terrible questions. What happens to a surgically altered boy who exists only as the former emperor's grotesque fantasy? What place does Sabina have in a world that's rejected everything Nero represented? The answer comes in the form of Otho, one of the generals who helped orchestrate the rebellion. He claims you along with the rest of Nero's estate, not out of desire, but because you represent a useful symbol of the previous regime's continuity. For several months, you play the same role for a new master, wearing the same clothes, answering to the same false name, pretending to be someone you've never been. But Otho falls to yet another challenger, and you're passed along again like a valuable object. This time your new owner is Vitellius, a man whose appetites run toward public spectacle rather than private delusion. He announces that you'll perform in the Colosseum, reenacting mythological scenes for the entertainment of Roman crowds. The specific scenario he chooses, Persephone's abduction by Hades, leaves no doubt about his intentions. After years of private humiliation, you're to be sexually degraded before thousands of spectators, your violation transformed into entertainment for their bloodthirsty amusement. The prospect finally breaks whatever psychological chains have kept you compliant for so long. In your cell, beneath the Colosseum, surrounded by the sounds of wild animals and dying gladiators, you make the first completely free choice of your adult life. The poison is bitter but quick, purchased from a guard with jewelry that once adorned a dead empress. As consciousness fades, you feel something you haven't experienced since childhood, the peace of being completely yourself, without performance or pretense. In those final moments, you remember the boy who loved Greek poetry, who dreamed of studying philosophy, who might have lived an ordinary life filled with ordinary joys. That boy died on a surgeon's table years ago, but his spirit finally finds release in this dank cell beneath Rome's most famous monument to casual cruelty. Your story becomes a footnote to imperial excess, remembered only as evidence of Nero's madness rather than as a testament to human endurance. History records your existence but not your humanity, your suffering but not your strength, your death but not the courage it took to choose it. But perhaps that's enough. In a world where absolute power reduces people to objects, where emperors reshape reality to match their fantasies, where the vulnerable exist only to serve the desires of the strong, your final act of defiance echoes across centuries. You chose dignity over degradation, death over further humiliation, truth over the comfortable lies that kept you breathing. The empire that destroyed you grinds on, finding new victims for its machinery of power, new ways to transform human beings into living symbols of imperial will. But somewhere in the darkness beneath the Colosseum, a boy named Sporus finally came home to himself, and that small victory against impossible odds reminds us that even in the most hopeless circumstances, the human spirit can still choose its own path to freedom. The systems that enabled your destruction, unchecked authority, the dehumanization of the powerless, the willingness of societies to look away from convenient atrocities, didn't die with Nero or even with Rome itself. They live on in every age, wearing new clothes, but serving the same fundamental purpose: reducing people to objects, erasing inconvenient humanity, transforming individual suffering into acceptable collateral damage. Your story matters not because it's unique, but because it's universal. A reminder that behind every historical narrative of power and glory, there are individual human lives being quietly destroyed, and that remembering those lives, speaking their names, refusing to let their suffering disappear into footnotes, is perhaps the only way we honor both their memory and our own humanity.